So you're looking for answers on SOC 2 and you landed on this webinar/video. Well, this is the right place for you. I'll take you through the whole journey. What is the readiness phase? What is SOC 2 type 1 versus type 2? What are the cost implications and the timelines? SOC stands for Service Organization Control. It is an auditing standard maintained by American Institute of CPAs to test organizations' internal control under different areas. It can be financial controls, it can be security, privacy, confidentiality controls, availability controls. We will get into the details of that. But in a nutshell, it is an objective third-party system that tells your customers that they can trust you to handle their data with an utmost care. Why SOC 2? What are the drivers for SOC 2? Recently, we are relying more and more on third-party services, SaaS services. There are many B2B agreements of transfer and exchange of data. In parallel to that, recent years have witnessed an increase in third-party data breaches. So we need something to bridge the gap between the reliance on these services and the maturity of security controls. Here comes SOC 2 to fill in the gap and provide the solution. It is being asked more and more to be included in RFPs and RFQs. You can show it to your customer to gain their trust, for them to make sure that you have created a good security culture in your organization and you have implemented the right security controls around their data. On top of that, SOC aligns with many standards out there, such as HIPAA, which you cannot be certified against. So if you show some compliance to SOC, indirectly it means that you're complying with other frameworks such as HIPAA or iTrust. So who uses SOC reports? By the way, SOC is not a certification. At the end of the journey, you'll get a report from the CPA firm saying that you have been qualified to host critical information or data. Either you pass or didn't pass the audit. So who uses it? We have three types of SOC reports: 1, 2, 3. SOC 1 is a report with a strong focus on financial controls. SOC 2 is a report with a focus on trust service criteria. We will talk about that in details. However, you can consider that these criteria are mainly related to security. SOC 3 report is a brief report on trust service criteria or security mainly that can be shared with the public. So it's like a sanitized kind of report that can be used for marketing purposes. So who uses these reports? From the SOC 1 perspective, the company auditor and the company controller office can use the report. The SOC 2 report is usually shared under NDAs by management to regulators, to clients and prospective customers, etc., to demonstrate that you have a good security culture within your company and you can be trusted to manage PII or sensitive types of data. And as I said, SOC 3 is a publicly available report that can be shared on your website with anyone for marketing purposes. So since our focus on this webinar is on SOC 2 reports, we have to drill more on the types. A type 1 SOC report is a point-in-time report. So suppose that you did your audit on August 1st. This report will certify that you have the correct security controls designed as of this date. So again, it's just a point-in-time report. It covers the design effectiveness of your internal controls that help to meet control objectives of the framework or the trust service criteria. We'll discuss. Don't worry about that. If you don't get this at this point in time, just bear with me for a while. The type 1 audit report attests to the suitability of the internal controls and validates the sufficiency of controls in aggregate to meet the achievement of the control objective or the trust service criteria. However, the SOC 2 report covers a period of time, typically between 6 and 12 months. And this is usually done on an annual basis. This type of audit report covers the design of the internal controls as well as the operating effectiveness of the internal controls over a period of time. So type 1, point in time; type 2, operational effectiveness over a period of time. A type 2 SOC engagement provides a good assurance or a reasonable assurance that the controls were designed and operated effectively in your company to meet the service organization objectives or the trust control criteria. Type 2 SOC report, as it may appear, is a more comprehensive report than type 1 and provides greater level of audit assurance. A type 2 SOC engagement effectively addresses the same subject matter as type 1. However, type 2 SOC goes further in that it contains an opinion on the operating effectiveness of controls over time that they were operating and provides detailed description of the test of controls performed by the auditor. The results of those tests will indicate whether the control performed with or without exceptions. The result will be highlighted in the report as an no exception or as an exception, of course based on the trust service criteria. Now, how does the SOC 2 report timeline look? Usually you need to prepare and get ready. You can here start with a self-assessment. You can do some spot checks. You can work with the team to remediate any gaps that you have. Of course, as a prerequisite, you need to have your documentation, policies, procedures, operating procedures, technical procedures in place. So this is the bulk of the time that you need to spend in order to attain or to make sure that you're compliant with the trust service criteria. Once you have your policies, procedures, internal controls in place, you can aim for SOC 2 Type 1 or SOC 2 Type 2 audit. Usually companies go for the Type 1 first, and then on the next year or subsequent year, they aim for the Type 2 audit. After the audit is completed, you will be issued a final report with a recommendation. And of course, since SOC 2 Type 2 demonstrates operational effectiveness over a period of time, it has to be done on an annual basis. How to get ready for SOC 2? Getting prepared for SOC 2 audit begins by performing an actual readiness assessment or a self-assessment that identifies important scoping issues, while also assessing your current control environment regarding IT, operational infrastructure, policies, procedures, etc. Furthermore, a SOC 2 readiness assessment can be conducted quickly, like yielding measurable information for helping correct these gaps and deficiencies before the actual audit. Once all relevant issues have been assessed, your organization can immediately begin to assign tasks for remediating all these issues, hopefully resulting in a successful and efficient SOC 2 audit. Scope is very important because scope creep is often a big issue when performing SOC 2 assessments, as an almost endless list of information systems, people, and locations can be considered in scope of the audit. So determining the exact business process, the product, along with specific systems that are going to be assessed is critically important. The trust service criteria are the criteria-based mandates for which your organization or the service organization are tested against for SOC 2 compliance. And these TSCs, we call them, trust service criteria, are mainly 5: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. And they are each unique in many ways. You should ask yourself which of the TSCs should you include in the scope of a SOC 2 engagement and why. given that the only mandatory TSC is the security one. Your team's preparation and involvement is a critical aspect of a successful SOC 2 journey. They need to understand why you are doing this. They need to understand why they should invest their time dealing with the auditor, providing evidence to the auditor, and above all, they need to understand the value this SOC 2 will bring to your business. Usually the auditor will sit with different audiences during the audit. The leadership team needs to meet your auditor just to understand that sponsorship is there, the security culture has been embraced by the top management. And then detailed walkthroughs can happen with different teams, such as the security team, the IT team, the engineering team if you have a product, as well as some other departments such as the HR, legal, and finance. Usually walkthroughs are there on the systems, evidence is asked to be provided to the auditor, documentation, sharing of policies, procedures, Q&As, so it's open during the audit session. We've been talking a lot about the trust service criteria. So here is a breakdown. We have security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Security is also known as common criteria. You'll see that more often, CC. This is only required TSC and is included to demonstrate that systems and at your service organization are protected against unauthorized access and other risks that could impact the service organization's ability to provide the service promised to the client. Some examples can be utilization of NAC solutions, application firewall, web firewall, two-factor authentication, IDS, IPS, etc. The next TSC is availability. It included where service organizations need to demonstrate that their systems are available all the time. The third one is processing integrity. It's usually included when the service organization wants to demonstrate that their system processing is occurring accurately and timely. Actually, it varies from one industry to another. In some industries, availability is critical. In other industries, processing integrity might be more important than availability. So it actually, you choose these TSCs based on your industry. The fourth one is the confidentiality. This TSC is included to demonstrate that the data classified as confidential is actually protected. You can use different technologies here, such as encryption, KMS, and access controls, and firewalls. And the last but not least is privacy. When a service organization is in possession of PII data, personal data, critical data, this TSC is included to show that the personal data is protected and handled appropriately. Some examples can be the use of encryption, MFA, access control, etc. If you go through the control requirements, you will see that there are lots of redundant requirements by the framework itself. Here is some further examples on the trust service criteria and what you can do actually to comply to the control objectives of the framework. Now let's see how COSO is helping here. So COSO framework is a widely used framework for internal control. And a SOC 2 audit evaluates your system design based on the COSO framework and internal controls you implement across your infrastructure at a given point in time or over a period of time. The SOC 2 common criteria list is also known as a CC series, and it includes 9 subcategories that you'll be assessed against. These 9 subcategories include 17 internal control principles from the COSO frameworks that have been mapped to the security or the common criteria. COSO is mapped into the first 5 criteria only, so from CC1 to CC5. The first one, control environment, common criteria 1, covers COSO principles 1 to 5, and this criteria section covers the service organization's commitment to integrity and ethical values, independence by the board, management, and board oversight, the hiring, firing, maintaining, and ongoing monitoring of quality of employees in your organization. The communications information, or CC2, includes the communication of relevant information, line of authority, for example, boundaries of the system, changes to internal personnel as well as clients of the service or organizations. The third one is CC3, which includes the demonstration that the service organization is assessing its risks, possibly impacting their operations, and putting plans in place to mitigate those risks. CC4 covers the ongoing evaluation of the system at the service organization and the notification to relevant personnel in the event that there is a breakdown in the system. CC5 section tests that the service organization has controls in place for the mitigation of risks, and also that the controls in place are monitored on an ongoing basis. So these are mainly aligned with COSO framework, CC1 till CC5. You don't need to worry about the principles and the numbering of the principles. Apart from that, it gets more technical with the logical and physical access security, which is quite evident. Then the system operations, like anything related to incident response, disaster recovery, your change management, how you're changing the code on the live environment, how you're changing any configuration on your live environment, and of course, risk mitigation. Here is an example of one of the requirements under CC6, which is logical access and physical security. You'll have the principle which says that the entity implements logical access security software infrastructure till the end, and under that you have some points in focus that you need to take care of, or some controls that need to be implemented and put in place for you to actually comply to the criteria or to the principles under this criteria. All right, so we have prepared for the audit and we have gone through the audit. Now it's time to wait for the report. What does this report usually contain? It contains the auditor's point of view, it contains the management assertion, the description of the system, and the control test. The first section of the report is a summary of the audit, short and sweet, to the point. Usually this section is written by the auditor. It provides a summary on the entire examination, including the scope, the time period, and the final opinion. For many, this is the most important part of the report, since it usually says whether the service organization passed its audit. Right, here are some of the terms auditors use to describe the audit result. It can be qualified or unqualified, adverse, or disclaimer of opinion. So obviously adverse means that the company has failed, qualified means that the company has passed, and disclaimer of opinion means that the auditor does not have enough information to make a fair conclusion. Now, most SOC 2 reports show tests in a table format with the following information. Like, he will show the common criteria being tested against, the service criteria or the TSC or TSP, the control number, the control description from the company, and the auditor's test to the control and the test results. All right, so now as a company, you might ask, which report do I need? The need for security, of course, will exponentially grow with the growth of your company. So whether you're a startup, you're at a pre-seed stage or seed stage, Series A, B, C, etc., it can help you define what you need in terms of SOC. At minimum, it is recommended that seed companies upgrade their internal controls and Series A companies to implement SOC 2 Type 1. So at least start with SOC 2 Type 1. For established companies, you need to start with Type 1 for the first year and subsequently Type 2, which you need to renew each year. SOC 1 Type 1 or SOC 2 Type 2, there are many deciding factors, as I said before. Your company stage, how many employees do you have, the number of systems you have, your locations, geographical locations, the revenue, the sensitivity of data you handle, etc. However, in both cases, you will spend much time preparing for the audit. And in terms of In terms of cost implications, usually the SOC 2 Type 1 report cost between 10 to 15K. Meanwhile, the Type 2 audit cost more than that. And usually the time frame for the audit is 2 weeks to 4 weeks on site, and they will require another 4 weeks on top of that to draft the report. Meanwhile, it's much more than that when it comes to SOC 2 audit, because they will be collecting evidence throughout the whole year. The actual audit period can be like from 4 to 6 weeks on site, and they'll take another 2 to 4 weeks on top of that to draft the report. Now, how can you fulfill the SOC 2 control requirements? The process includes policy implementation, technical and operational procedures. So definitely you need to have the documentation in its place. The policies, usually the auditor for SOC 2 Type 1, they will ask to examine the policies, the distribution list, and how are you actually translating and executing these policies. From the SOC 2 Type 1 perspective, or Type 2 perspective, the auditors will examine the functionality of the controls written in these policies over a period of 6 to 12 months. When it comes to technical procedures, SOC 2 actually focuses on the policies and the procedures instead of technical, because it's not a security framework. It's like a reporting and prescriptive framework rather than security framework. However, the implementation of technical procedures involving building and managing tools is really important. As we said before and gave examples such as endpoint security, multi-factor authentication, access control, firewalls, encryption, etc. You should have your procedures checked in and monitored over time, of course, for effectiveness. Another aspect of procedures is the operational procedures, which is as important as the technical procedures, because this can involve process at the organization level, such as how you manage your vendors, your third party, your due diligence, and how do you create custom onboarding, offboarding processes, how do you train your users, what is the disciplinary process you have, and etc. So as you can see, policies, procedures, technical and operating procedures. Now, as we said before, gap analysis is very important if you're starting with a new, or actually you're maintaining the SOC 2 report. Someone needs to come in place and evaluate the current information security practices that you have. Based out of this engagement, a gap analysis report or a checklist will be produced. You need to make sure to put the required controls in place. After that, you need to have a risk assessment to make sure that the controls are actually effective and the risk is minimized. And after that, once you're fully confident, you can go for an actual SOC 2 audit. Now, some things you need to know from the resource perspective, maybe as well from the financial perspective. Some organizations do not have the resources internally, so they can recruit a virtual CISO, external CISO, or external resource to help them with their SOC 2 implementation and in general the SOC 2 journey. You need to have your policies in place. So if you don't have a set of policies in place, you can use templates over the internet, or you can recruit an external party to write these policies from scratch to you, policies, procedures, of course. You need to have an awareness training program. I refer here to cybersecurity awareness training program for your employees to make them aware of risks regarding phishing emails, business email compromise, CEO frauds, social engineering attacks. What is the risk and the implications that this can have on your organization? From the recruitment perspective, background checks should be in place. There are many online systems and local services in different countries that can offer this service. From the scanning perspective, vulnerability scanning or penetration testing, usually it's not like fully mentioned. It's not clearly mentioned that you need to have penetration testing and vulnerability scanning. However, you need to make sure that you're managing your vulnerabilities, and one of the best ways to do it is actually to recruit a third party to perform these vulnerability scanning, or maybe have a SaaS product to schedule these scans on your systems, and maybe once in a year you have a full-fledged assessment like penetration testing or a red teaming on your company. Of course, you need also to, especially if you're a new company or a startup, you need to have endpoint security in place across all your endpoints. All right, so now we're towards the end of the webinar. I'll just give a small comparison between SOC 2 and ISO 27001, the father of the standards when it comes to security. So why do you need to go to SOC 2 versus ISO 27001? So first of all, the applicability of SOC 2, as we said, SOC 2 is a framework regulated and maintained by the American Institute of CPAs. So the geographic location is mainly US of A, but it's of course exponentially expanding across the whole world. However, the ISO 27001 is an international standard. From the definition perspective, the ISO 27001 is a standard which formally specifies requirements for establishing, implementing, and maintaining a continually improving an ISMS within your organization. From the SOC 2 perspective, it's, as we said, it's not a security framework, or it's just a reporting framework which has been created by some accountants which can attest to the independent assessment and testing of certain controls in your environment based on trust service criteria that can be applicable. So as you can see here, SOC 2 is more relaxed than the robust ISO 27001. From the industry perspective, it is applicable, ISO is applicable to any organization in any industry. SOC 2 is applicable to service providers. Mainly we say that service providers, SaaS providers that actually handle data of the public or their clients. Certification body, it's the ISO, very well known, the ISO certification body versus the American CPAs, Institute of CPAs. And the duration, usually the ISO certificate is valid for 3 years with annual surveillance audits. Meanwhile, the SOC certification is maybe it's a point in time for type 1 and over a 1 year or 6 months for type 2, in where you need to have an annual reattestation for the controls.